I want to start with something that sounds like an advantage: being intelligent. Most people imagine clarity, better decisions, a mind that works faster and more effectively than others, and in many ways, that's true. You see patterns quicker. You understand concepts deeper. You notice things others miss, but there's another side to it, a quieter one. Because when your mind can go deeper, it doesn't always know where to stop. A simple situation doesn't stay simple. It expands. You don't just hear what someone said. You hear how they said it, why they said it, what they might have meant underneath it. And suddenly, a short conversation becomes something layered. Not because it actually is, but because your mind builds layers onto it. That's where the first struggle begins. Overthinking, not as a habit, as a default. Your brain doesn't ask whether something is worth analyzing. It just analyzes everything. A message, a decision, a memory. Each one branches into possibilities. What did they mean? What if I misunderstood? What if I missed something important? And the more you think, the more variables appear. At a certain point, you're not improving your decisions, you're delaying them, because clarity keeps moving further away the more you search for it. There's also something else that develops over time. You begin to feel out of sync, not better than others, not worse, just different. Conversations can feel too fast or too shallow. While others react, you're already analyzing the context, the tone, the possible interpretations. So when you respond, you're responding to something deeper than what was actually said. And that creates distance, because connection depends on shared understanding, and when your internal process becomes more complex, it becomes harder to translate. So you simplify. You say less than you're thinking. You hold back. Not because you want to hide, but because explaining everything would take too long. And eventually that turns into something heavier, feeling misunderstood, not because people don't care, but because they don't see what you see. And trying to explain it becomes exhausting, so you stop trying. You keep more of your thoughts to yourself, and that creates a kind of isolation, not physical, mental. You can be around people and still feel alone, because your experience isn't being matched. There's another layer to this: expectation. When your mind is capable of more, you expect more from yourself. Better decisions, better outcomes, better control. And when reality doesn't match that expectation, it feels like failure, even when it isn't. Because your standard isn't based on what's realistic, it's based on what you can imagine. And what you can imagine is often far beyond what's necessary, so you end up living in a constant gap between potential and reality. And living in that gap is exhausting. There's also something people rarely talk about: sensitivity, not emotional weakness, awareness. You pick up on small shifts, tone changes, body language, subtle tension in a room. Things most people don't consciously notice. And once you notice them, you can't ignore them, so your brain tries to make sense of everything. Why did they say that? Why did their energy change? What does that mean? And again, a small moment becomes something much bigger. Not because it is, but because your mind expands it. And over time, that constant expansion becomes heavy. Not physically, mentally. You're always processing, always analyzing, always aware. So your brain starts searching for something it rarely finds. Stillness, not silence, but a place where it doesn't have to keep going, where it doesn't have to solve, predict, or understand everything. And this is where the real shift begins. Because the goal isn't to stop thinking. That doesn't work. The goal is to change what you expect from your thinking, to stop asking it for things it cannot give you. Perfect certainty, complete understanding, total control. Those don't exist, no matter how intelligent you are. So the shift is this: not using your intelligence to eliminate uncertainty, but learning to exist with it, to make decisions without perfect clarity, to speak without analyzing every possible outcome, to act while your mind is still generating questions. Because intelligence doesn't simplify life. It makes you aware of its complexity, but it also gives you something else: the ability to see yourself, to notice your patterns, to understand your reactions, to reflect. And if you turn that ability inward instead of using it to control everything outside, something changes. Your mind stops being a constant problem to solve and becomes something you can work with. Not perfectly, not all the time, but enough. Enough to feel less stuck, less overwhelmed, less alone inside your own thoughts, because your mind was never the problem. It's just been trying to do too much, for too long, and maybe what it really needs is not more thinking, but permission. Permission to not solve everything, permission to not understand everything, permission to let some things stay uncertain. And in that space, something unexpected happens. Your mind slows down. Not because it has fewer thoughts, but because it no longer treats every thought as something urgent. And for the first time, intelligence stops feeling like pressure and starts feeling like clarity. And once that shift begins, something else changes, not in how much you think, but in how you relate to your thinking. Before, every thought felt important, like something you needed to figure out, solve, respond to. But now, you start noticing a difference. Some thoughts are just noise, possibilities your brain generates automatically, not signals that require action, and that realization creates space, because you stop treating every idea as a responsibility. You start letting some of them pass, and at first, that feels uncomfortable, because your mind is used to engaging with everything. It's used to going deeper, analyzing further, looking for the right answer. But when you don't follow that, nothing breaks, nothing collapses, the situation doesn't get worse, and that's new, because for a long time, your brain believed something else, that if you don't think everything through, you might miss something important, you might make a mistake, you might lose control. But now you start seeing that control was never as complete as it felt. It just felt necessary. And the more you experience moments where you don't overanalyze, and things still turn out fine, the more your brain begins to relax that grip. Not completely, but enough. Enough to take action without needing perfect clarity. Enough to speak without rehearsing every sentence. Enough to move forward even when your mind still has questions. And that changes how you experience life. You're still aware, still perceptive, still capable of deep understanding, but you're not trapped inside it. You don't live entirely in your head anymore. You move between thinking and experiencing, between analyzing and acting. And that balance is what most people never realize they're missing. Because intelligence isn't meant to replace experience, it's meant to support it. And when it starts doing that instead of controlling everything, life feels different, lighter. Not because everything is simple, but because not everything feels like a problem to solve. And maybe that's the real advantage. Not thinking more than others, but knowing when to stop. Not because you can't continue, but because you don't need to. And in that moment, your mind isn't racing ahead. It's finally with you, present, clear, and for once, quiet enough to let you live.